Yes? Awesome. I know it's been a ton of information, and we're going to take a couple minutes here. I just want to hear from you all. Uh, what has landed with you? Like, what has stuck? So in the chat right now, put in an exclamation point and share with me like something that has really resonated with you. Because I recognize sometimes you go through like a 12-hour seminar like this, and some things really resonate and other things you think are entertaining and, you forget, but it's all good. And also, I do appreciate that you guys love that intro song. It is Halloween. So I'm saying in advance, happy Halloween. No one did it better than Michael Jackson. All right out the gate, Jonathan Walker. What did you take away so far?
So I really liked the motivation yesterday with the first speaker. But I like that knowing that some too many matrix could hinder you if you're not making a decision on those matrix. And I really took a lot of heat on that because I'm a big conversion data in my current job in the Army. So I see a lot of numbers, and if you're not making decisions on those numbers, then what are they there for type thing. So that I took that away. I like that all the speakers were really talking about keeping things simple. I took that a lot, and I really enjoyed that of making simple better. And I typically tell my students that at the recruiting and retention college here at Fort Knox is don't try to overwhelm things. Have a goal, make some assessments, and be able to adapt to those things. So I took that knowledge and being able to understand when we're doing our formational runs on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, not to really get onto them if they're falling out of those runs, because there may be something else besides lack of conditioning. It may be your muscular oxidation levels are low, or there may be a training technique, or your lactic acid may build up, and they may not know that. But it doesn't, knowing what I know now, I don't have to go in and discourage them and be like, hey, keep running, when there may be something underlining issues that may be going on.
Totally. So we could always lead with a question, right? Ask what's going on, right? And then, that builds our ability to connect. And again, less is more, right? So that's what I'm hearing from you. And sometimes it can be challenging to distill what's important amidst the noise of all the data and information that's out there. So great takeaway. Okay, so next, Zach White, you were next to put an exclamation point.
Yeah, so similar to Mark, like just the self-talk. I bought 2 of those books that she mentioned as soon as she was done talking, because I want to know, like, is there a better way to get up this hill? If talking to myself helps me get there, then let's do it.
We're going to be talking a little bit about that. And self-talk is so important. And you know what? As we get better at it ourselves and we start to work our own explanatory style, that helps us move us to more positive, like having a more positive outlook on everything. And then that also shows our athletes how to do what we're doing. So we're modeling that behavior. I know it's an inner monologue, but that exudes us, and our athletes will pick up on that. Wonderful. Buford, Fred, I'm sorry, Fred, go ahead. Tell me, what would you learn about recovery?
Yes, thanks so much. Hopefully you guys can hear me there. Yeah, just was excited because we had some information regarding sleep and recovery. The Dr. Allison Barringer. And so, yes, I am doing some research there to help my mom specifically because she's struggling with sleep right now. She's going through some things with her thyroid. But definitely, it definitely has helped. And so I'm just excited that I'm learning things that I can not only help an athlete, but folks, especially ones we love. And of course, everyone, whether we know them or not, we want them to be healthy and prosper in that area as well. So I thank God. It's truly a blessing. And thank you guys so much.
Yeah, for sure. Recovery, everyone thinks recovery is, foam rolling, but like we heard on very first night, like Alyssa Clark said it, the way she was able to run 95 marathons in 95 days was sleep. That's the one thing she said. And, I want to give us all a little bit of grace here. When you hear that, don't feel bad about yourself if you struggle to get 8 hours sleep, right? It's all right. It's all right. You will find it like in time as you start to implement regular, better sleep habits, it will change. It's not going to change overnight. And sometimes we induce anxiety on ourselves when we know we're supposed to get a certain amount of sleep and then we don't. And then you're laying there, you're like, God damn, why can't I fall asleep? And then when you think that, then you're really not falling asleep, right? So let's just remember to give ourselves some grace. It is what it is. And in time, it will improve. Wonderful. Josh Swink, would you get from facilitation and communication?
So it's kind of funny. This week I had to attend a mandatory corporate training class for my from the company I work for, and it's just been like painful. Like nobody's controlling the people unmuting. So like I do that in the daytime, then I come here at night, and it's night and day. And I'm thankful that you guys are organized. You're bringing in good speakers. You're controlling how the facilitation goes, and you can have all the knowledge in the world and not facilitate well, and it's lost. And I've learned a lot just from the virtual control of how you guys are doing, and it made the education so much better and made me more attentive and paying attention better. So I appreciate that from you guys. And I'm just telling you, this week daytime has been real bad, nighttime's been great. So I really appreciate it.
Man, thank you so much for saying that. I mean, I know you appreciate it, but I think on behalf of Carl Little and myself, and Nate Palin, we appreciate it because we put in a lot of effort to make sure that this is as smooth as possible for you. And man, some of you guys that have been in some of our past seminars, the uncertainty and the unpredictability of the interwebs can always throw a wrench in this son of a gun. So I appreciate you, Josh. Sean, what did you take away from Nate's presentation on endurance theory?
So it's one of those things that I really want to dive into. And just the balancing of, the schedules, the day of weeks, and the basically the programming aspect of endurance running. And because I was always that guy that just every time I went out there and I hammered, you know, if it was 3 miles, I was going as hard as I could. If it was 10 miles, I was going as hard as I could. And, obviously, that's fine when you're 20, but now that I'm 55, it's a different story. And I'm working with other guys who are in their 40s and 50s. So, understanding that is, and digging into it is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, periodization is important, right? And it's like as we get older, we get wiser, we become more calculated in what we do. And it's great to hear that because we have our whole lives of being a beast. I don't know about you guys, but I forget whose body I'm in. I mean, I'm 46, my inner monologue is 26. And when I was 26, I was a beast. So I get out there and sometimes I forget whose body I'm in. Now I remember the next day because that body hurts like all get out. And so if we can practice restraint, right, and do the program and periodize the program appropriately, we can live longer to get more workouts in and achieve better results. So totally agree, Sean. Awesome. Brian May, what'd you take away?
Okay, so it's funny you mentioned. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's funny you mentioned the foam roller because that's kind of what led to my comment. there's so many things that some people believe in. I mean, there's things that I believe in that work, and someone else maybe that's voodoo, to them. Uh, my last deployment before I retired, I was working with this Navy chief, and he turned me on these things called binaural beats and frequencies. And in my world, it helps immensely with recovery, because maybe it's just because I believe in it. And so if someone comes to me, if one of my players come to me and like, coach, this really works for me. If it works for you and you believe it, then do it. It's not for me to take that away from you that doesn't, because I don't want to take you, I don't want to make you take a step back when we're all trying to go forward. So I really like that he touched on that, that was touched on last night.
Great. Gargantuan. You wrote, "Don't be a dinosaur." Explain. You with us? All right. Moving on to Sean. Buzzer. Recovery stuff. Sean, would you learn about recovery stuff?
I don't know. Let's go. We got
Sean, you with us, or you have practice? All right, just checking on everyone. Nelson, what'd you get? You got an exclamation point in there.
I typed it down because I don't know if you guys can hear me. There's a lot of background noise. I'm in a jiu-jitsu studio right now. But if you guys can hear me,
Gotcha.
Good? No background.
All good.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So mine was about the wearables. When I forgot his name, but he was explaining about the difference between wearables, how important they are, the metrics. And for myself, I've been using, say for example, a Whoop for over 8 years now, 7 years since it just came out. We got them on the teams, and it was just something that will track us. And then I became fully dependent on it. As I transitioned out of the military, and then I started getting a little more into endurance sports, like training for a triathlon. I wanted to do an Ironman right after my medical retirement to prove them wrong. I continued using that with Garmin, and it helped in some way because I knew exactly what I was looking at, because I had a coach, and my coach will, send me all my programming, and it was helpful that way. But then after a while, when I was just using it myself, it was just became very overwhelming. And then it became more stressful, because then I'll be like, well, I didn't sleep. I have trouble sleeping. I didn't sleep well. Maybe I should rest, but my body felt great. So I stopped listening to my body as it changed, right? Mm. We grow, we develop certain injuries. There's other medical issues that happen. And what it did is just created more and more and more stress. So I ultimately decided, well, I don't want to wear wearables anymore for a while, just to kind of give myself a reset. I think we all deserve that. Give ourselves a reset to start listening to our bodies a little bit more.
Man, I'm so glad you brought that up, Nelson, because I think what you're hitting on is something that's ever present within all of sports science. So as sports science has really gotten more into the data, right? Sometimes what happens is we lose this tactile intuition, this sense that we have of what is happening, like listening to our body. It mutes it because now we're relying on this data. And I don't know if you guys know about Heisenberg's principle, right, of electron duality. It's something in quantum physics, and it's one of those things where they've learned when you're trying to measure a photon, like light particles behave both as waves and particles, right? And so if you shoot a photon on a screen, it's a wave, right? But the minute you attach any measuring device to observe the photon, it behaves as a particle. It's so wild how that works. And the point I'm trying to make here is not to teach quantum physics, but to say sometimes when we measure, when we add the science, it changes the system. It changes the result of what's happening. And this can happen. So there's a psychology that we all have to adopt in how we approach data. Data is data, and we create the narrative of what the data means. Whether it's good, bad, effective, or not is up to us. That happens in our brain. So really important to remember that I wear an Aura ring, which I love, and I love checking that data. And I can tell you, it is easy to do exactly like you said, Nelson, like, oh, my sleep score was down. It says my readiness is bad. I shouldn't train. While at the same time, I feel pretty good. I could probably just go for a jog or something. So anyway, listening to our body is still paramount. Awesome.
Can I add something to it?
Yeah.
And I think that really transfers, right? Because I'm like a guinea pig. Before I coach somebody, I try it on myself first. And it really transfers when we're coaching other athletes. Like right now, I coach just a few, and mostly in combat sports. But then once I want to start broadening out myself, it's going to be so much more difficult just to track everyone's data, and then we start forgetting about the person itself, the human being behind it. That's what I've noticed in the past.
And it's intuitive, right? And I think our whole nation, people in general, we are moving away from learning the skills of intuition. And the best thing, we know we can improve our own intuition. So yeah, sometimes we just need to put the device down and listen with our whole being. So lastly, I know there's a bunch of other stuff here. Peter Rubenacker, what'd you take away?
So I'm literally transitioning right now. So I coach. It's always at the younger level. So I never have dedicated time, like after or before, with the athletes, and listening to everybody, listening to you, listening to Nate and all the other instructors. I'll tell you what, and all the other coaches that provide feedback, that are in this call. This is my first session in sideline, soldiers to sidelines. And I couldn't be more excited every time I get on, and more impressed with how everybody just relays their what they've done in their entire lives, or even a short term, and every aspect of every piece of information that has been coming is like mind boggling, because I think about things, and I just never have enough time dedicated to it because of I was 25 years in the military, finally retiring out. Like, you never have a minute to yourself. So now that I have time, and listening to everybody, and it's just amazing. It's I want to take every person's concept, but I know I have to find the one that's going to work for me, and then I got to find the one that works for every individual that I want to coach or train, and because everybody will be different. Every single person, every single coach is unique in their own way, their own fashion, and I just want to know, I've never thought of all the different things that everybody's been saying and teaching. And I know I have never gotten this as an athlete, coming up, playing multiple sports from track and field to lacrosse to even swimming and diving to football, like basketball. I've never gotten as much, or even a bit of the information that you guys are all kind of relaying over the mic, and impressing me with how much more there is to just being a coach. And in my mind, after that homework assignment yesterday, why do you still want to be a coach? Or what brings you to this point? And the ability to train an individual at any stage, whether they're a youth all the way to an adult, and give them their ability to achieve for themselves, even with a little judgment, like all of us have had in our careers or in our lives, and watching that transition change and happen, I think for me is always the biggest thing. Even outside of sports, I've had Marines that are the 90%, right? Like the 10% that you spend 90% on, right? Because they're just that type of person, or they're in a negative way, but then you change them around, and they're one of the best people in the world. And same thing with sports, taking a kid who just started and bringing them to a level of amazing, right? Even in their first year, or watching their kind of career go through, and excelling and achieving the goals, and that's, I think, what changes the ball game for me. And listening to every single one of you guys get on the mic, and explaining how you guys do your business, some of the chats, reading through, and even some of the homework assignments I was going through, reading everybody's why they want to coach and everything, just because I want to know while it will not be a full-time thing for me in the near future, I want to volunteer to a point where I'm, I live in Hawaii, so it's a little expensive. So I got to get to a place where, I have enough money where I can call quits, but I don't want to stop coaching. I want to volunteer. I want to volunteer at the high school level. And then when I get out, maybe, I'll be old as crap, but maybe I'll be able to jump into something at collegiate level. And that's kind of my aspiration.
Peter, it's all possible. And I love that you love this. And if you love what's happened so far, hold on to your pants because it's going to get even better. And our first guest presenter is a dear friend in Nick Barringer. He's an original bear dog. You don't even know what that means, but we got this side chat group between me and Nick and our other dear friend Martin Rooney, who you'll see in the sports performance, in the strength and conditioning seminars. He speaks at this and written a lot of books. And in this chat group is also one of Nick's clients, Jim Miller. Nelson, you'll appreciate this, man. Jim's the longest, fightingest UFC fighter there is. And this chat group's awesome. It's got more fart jokes in it than you can possibly imagine. So don't think this is some kind of brain trust. Really, I get dumber every single day reading this chat. But that just lets you know that how close Nick and I are. And in all seriousness, Nick is currently serving as the Chief Academic Officer and Dean of Graduate Studies at Lionel University. He served as a director of Army Baylor Master's Program in Nutrition and an assistant professor at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Previously, while working at USMA, he was, at the United States Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine. Nick researched warfighter nutritional requirements in differing environments, including deployed special operators. Nick served in the 75th Ranger Regiment as a member of the Ranger Athlete Warrior Program, where he oversaw the nutrition and aspects of physical training of Rangers. Nick received his undergraduate degree in dietetics from the University of Georgia and his doctorate in kinesiology from Texas A&M. Folks, please welcome my good friend, Nick Barringer.
Hey, Harrison, I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, fellow bear dog. Hey, I'm sorry a little bit, a little behind. I will say a new skill set I have. I can change a tire like a dang NASCAR. I think I'm going to try out for one of those teams because, I got a flat on my way home. So it was a little behind, but I'm ready to talk about also something that helped me was my nutrition for endurance because I had to endure. I had to get here. So I'm excited to talk about, nutrition with you today. I also want to share, again, like you heard, fellow veteran, I just got out of the Army, 31 August, hence this sweet beard I've been working on for about a month. But yeah, so I understand what everybody, kind of on here maybe is kind of going through, was listening in to the gentleman talking about that transition. It's a little bit scary, but hey, you're going to be okay. And you got this community to fall back on. So without further ado, I will share my screen and we'll get rocking and rolling. You just have to bear. There we go. And everybody's looking at that, right? You see, and boom. The endurance slides are showing. You see those, Harrison?
They see it. I gotta change my view, but like everyone's giving thumbs up. They see the endurance slides.
Okay, excellent. I want to make sure. Yeah, so what we're going to do and really kind of talk about here today, right? Is that that endurance performance. Let me see. I just lost you, Harrison. Let me make sure I got that up. Oh, there we go. So, want to break it down. Now, I do want to, kind of add a disclaimer up front. Now, I am a registered dietitian. From my understanding, most people on this call are not going to be registered dietitians. So when you give generalized nutrition advice, you're safe. But I would say as a coach, if you're going to do nutrition, be careful. And in terms of if you have somebody with some sort of eating disorder or some sort of clinical, disease state, diabetes, you want to refer them, like know when to refer, maybe find that dietitian. But overall, most states allow general, nutrition thing that's covered. But still, it's worth, check your state out, check those state laws on in terms of giving a nutrition advice, because some are pretty open, and then some can be more, restrictive. So I just want to put that out there and just always kind of understand your scope of practice. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into this. So when we talk about endurance exercise, Nate shared with me, we got people into rucking, we got people into ultra marathons, we got people into all sorts of different things. I'm kind of thinking how I'm framing this is prolonged activity, right? So we're looking at things that are 60 minutes or more. And so what I'm going to lay out for you is we're going to talk about a little bit about the nutrition, some of those strategies. We got to talk about hydration. I'm in Texas. I don't know if we have any Texans here on the call, but even though everybody else is like enjoying fall right now, it's still in the 90s. So, that weather's going to get a vote, and then how we recover from those activities, right? So looking at the macronutrients right out the get-go, what do you think is the most important macronutrient when we talk about nutrition? Anybody? They drop it in the chat. Let me look here. I'm giving you the answer. Oh, same here in Arizona. Whoop. Let me see. Where were we at? Water, carbs. I like, Charles, I wasn't thinking water. I like water. Water is up there, but you're exactly right with carbohydrates. Whoever said that, Marty said carbs. Nelson said carbs. I love it. Carbohydrates. Now, why is that? I'm going to give you the nerdy answer. You can produce more ATP, that adenosine triphosphate, that energy source per liter of oxygen with carbohydrates. And why do I tell you that? Is because if you understand that physiology, nobody can sell you on anything separately trying to tell you, well, you don't really need carbohydrates, etc. It's a physiological fact. So if you want to go hard, you want to go fast, you want to go long, you want to get those carbohydrates in. So that's going to be. Now, how much do you need? If you're just doing light, moderate training, like, 60 minutes or less, we're looking at, again, that 3 to 5 grams per kilogram of body weight. And remember, kilogram of body weight, not to insult anybody's intelligence, 2.2 pounds, right? Now, if you're going higher, you're like, Harrison, you're like, hey, I'm going to do a marathon, right? Now we're getting into that 7 to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight. It can go higher, but that's really, if we have any ultra marathoners out there, you're going 30 miles or more. I have had people go up to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. Again, if you're like Harrison and you want to do a full Ironman, then again, you could go up to that 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. So just understand there's different levels in terms of what that athlete wants to do. But if it's just like you're working with somebody and their thing is, hey, I want to do a half marathon, I would say in that 7 grams. Whereas if they're like, hey, this is my second or third marathon, I want to go as fast as possible, let's go to that 10 grams per kilogram of body weight, right? Because what we want to do is, make sure we're topping off those glycogen stores. So that's the carbohydrate in your muscle, and that's what's really going to fuel that activity. Now, protein, we still do need protein. Although we talk about carbohydrates and, hey, they're important. They're what we're going to fuel you. What's actually driving you down, that run or propelling you forward? It's your muscles. And you can use muscles as fuel. So if you don't have enough carbohydrates, this is another reason why it's important. Your body's going to want to make glucose. Our body wants to run off of that carbohydrate, right? And how's it going to make that? Well, through gluconeogenesis, it's going to grab your protein. It's going to start eating up your protein. It'll start eating up your muscles to make that glucose. You don't want that. And if anybody out there is listening, my military folks, if you've been to SEER school, Ranger school, anywhere where you've went a long time without, kind of eating, and you get that nice ammonia smell, on your uniform, that's that protein being deaminated. So you can kind of think of that. So again, long rucks, those sort of things. So another reason why we want to have enough carbohydrates is to protect that protein. But then we want to make sure we're getting in enough protein because we're doing damage to that tissue, right? We're breaking down that tissue. So anywhere about that 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that'll be about like 0.8 grams per pound, So some of you do that math, break out your calculator, do that math, and you might get a little sticker shock on how much protein that is. Just understand, hey, finding ways to break and get that in. I'm a food first person, but there are protein shakes, whey protein, ways that you can work it in your schedule if you're personally trying to do some sort of endurance event, or that athlete you're working with. Because I've worked with athletes and they're like, hey, Nick, I can't get in that much protein. And so that's where, we look at, okay, can we do supplementation? Are there other things we can do? Can we get a higher protein milk? That sort of thing. And then there's a piece of it that's nutrient timing. If you can get that in post workout, your body's going to do more with that protein. So if you can get it in within 30 to 60 minutes post workout, you get in those carbohydrates, you get in that protein, it's going to help repair. It's going to raise that muscle protein synthesis so you can repair and recover. So you can do that next training session. And then it's going to help refuel that carbohydrate as well. Now, fats are also important. Don't forget about fats. You do want fats. I never have anybody go below 20% fats. And why is that? Fats sometimes get a bad rap. Think of cholesterol. What's the first thing you think of when I ask about cholesterol? Anybody think of cardiovascular disease? Let me see. Anybody out there? So yeah, I see the what about fat. Okay. So yeah, fats to an excessive level, there could be negative things, but also remember, cholesterol is the backbone of testosterone. It's the backbone of estrogen. So you need that to produce your hormones. You need that for health. It's our cell walls. So make sure you get enough fats in there. And then if you're going longer, lower intensity, like if we have any, folks who are into like 100-mile race, right? Then it might be a little higher fat intake would be better there, because now we're going at a lower heart rate. We're not, trying to go as fast with that carbohydrate. Carbohydrate's still important, but you're going to need a little more of that fat in the diet. So, if you were doing a trek, if you're going up in the mountains, if weight is a concern with your athlete in terms of I've got to pack my own fuel into that situation, then you might want to go a little higher fat, because why? We get more calories per gram. We get that 9 calories per gram compared to that carbohydrate of 4 calories per gram. So that's just, again, some considerations about fats. Now, somebody, talked about water. We're going to get to water and fluids. Fluids are really, really important. If you just get 2% dehydrated, that is when you see decrements in performance. And so everybody on here, one practice I want you to do with your athletes is going to make a world of difference. And you're going to use this high speed, really technical device that everybody has at home. Are you ready for this? Your bathroom scale. All right. There's different, sweat patches and meters and all these sort of things. But I tell you what I found really effective is your bathroom scale. Have your athletes just weigh before and after their training sessions. And guess what you have? That weight loss, sadly, is not fat. That's mostly fluid loss. And so from that, I can get sweat rate. And from that sweat rate, I can know how much fluid to give that athlete. So you can just do that really simply, so you know how much fluid to give your athlete during a race. If they go out and run, and they lose 1% body weight, that's fine. You're not going to see too much, you're not going to see a decrement in performance. But if they lose 2% or more, you got to kind of revisit that hydration strategy, and then figure, okay, this is how many ounces I need to drink that mile, or, why I'm rucking, whether it's every 15 minutes. I've had guys like set a watch, guys and gals set a watch so they know something to drink. So, this is really important to make sure you're monitoring and getting in enough of those fluids. Now, the fluid composition is important. If you're going less than an hour, water works, but if you're going more than that, we're losing sodium, we're losing potassium, we're losing magnesium. So getting that in, and you can see this is kind of what you want to look for, because what I get asked a lot of times is, hey, Nick, what's the perfect hydration beverage? What should I be drinking? And I'll tell you, it's whatever you like, whatever you're willing to drink. If got the military members out there, if anybody remembers those oral rehydration salts they used to give out, how good did those taste? Nobody would drink them, right? They were like the perfect ratio, but the flavor was horrible. And so that's why the military now, if you get, most medics, what are they giving out? They're giving out Serasport, they're giving out Liquid IV, they're giving out insert that name, because different flavor profiles, different, airmen, sailors, service members, soldiers are going to drink that. So find one you like that works for you, that falls within that ratio I'm giving you here of that sodium, potassium, and magnesium content. And then if you like that flavor and it makes your stomach happy, go with that one. And then same with your athletes. Don't try anything new on race day, though. That's really important. The other piece of it is we want to talk about going into the activity, what we want to eat, during the activity, what we should be eating, and then immediately post, right? And so that's really important in terms to optimize. You know, you look at this nice kind of acai bowl. That would be a great, you know, high carbohydrate every day meal. We're getting in anthocyanins, we're getting in all those antioxidants that are in there that's going to help fuel you. But breaking it down, what's going to happen before a good pre-event? If you want a carbohydrate load, 36 to 48 hours prior, right? And this is, you know, again, if you're doing like a, you know, kind of something that's the same amount of like a PT test or the ACFT, you probably don't need a carbohydrate load. It's under 90 minutes. But if you're going longer, carbohydrate load, right? And so you want to get in as much carbohydrates as possible. And then right before that long event, if you consume a high carbohydrate and you want to go low fat, and why we're going low fat here, again, it's not that fat's bad, but that fat's going to slow that gastric emptying, getting those carbohydrates to that muscle. And then also you if you're still digesting those fats, they take a little longer. It leaves you susceptible to gastrointestinal distress, which is another thing you don't want when you're out running, right? So 3 to 4 hours beforehand. A good rule of thumb I'll give you is about 1 gram of carbohydrate for every kilogram of body weight for that athlete every hour out from that event. That's about what most people can process. So if I'm 2 hours out from that event and I got an 80 kilogram athlete, right, I could probably give them 160 grams of carbohydrates and their stomach will handle it. Now, you want to experiment during training, but that's a good rule of thumb to know. If we're just an hour out and it's like, oh, they need to eat something, they haven't had anything to eat, whatever, you know, happened. Maybe they got a flat tire and they didn't get to eat on the way in, then 80 grams. That would be a safe way. So you can kind of store that away so that could be, but if we're 4 hours out, again, we can go much higher because that's about how much you can process. Now, you know, looking at that, you know, you have multiple transportable carbohydrates in terms of that and taking it in during the event. And now, how does that work? 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Again, safe for most people. Most people on this call should be able to do that. If you're going higher, you know, kind of end, or you're really trying to, you know, hit a PR in that marathon or ultra marathon, ask her Yukendrup. And Yukendrup's one of the big names in this field. He's had people go 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Think like Kipchoge, right? That would be something I would definitely want to practice in training because different people's guts are going to be, you know, affected differently. That's quite a bit of carbohydrates. But that would be the goal. If you want to go as fast as possible, is to get up or get your athlete up to that 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Then when we talk about the mix of carbohydrates, you want a mix of glucose to fructose. I'm not going to totally nerd out on you here. Just know this. Glucose has a different transporter than fructose, right? So you're maximizing those 2 different transporters to get that carbohydrate in your system. And the ratio that usually works is 2 glucose to 1 fructose. And you can find different gels and things like that have that ratio. So if you do that, you get a good 2 to 1 ratio. You work with your athlete on a fueling strategy. That's just like breaking up the race and saying, okay, again, you know, could it be every, you know, 30 minutes we're getting in 30 grams? And that could be a mixture of a drink and a gel, or it could be a gel, or it could be a bar. Again, I've had athletes all over the place with this in terms of, you know, some people hate gels. So we try to make a little, you know, get a little more carbohydrates in their beverage, where some people, you know, don't like a really strong tasting fluid when they're drinking. So then we're going to go a little heavier on the gels, right? Or maybe gummies, or even honey. You could use honey. So there's a lot of different things you can use here and experiment with. And then immediately post-workout, we talked about that 30 to 60-minute window. If it's for an endurance athlete, I'm looking at 3 to 4 grams of carbohydrate per gram of protein to get in about a 3 to 4 ratio. And again, that target of 20 to 30 grams immediately post-workout. So, you know, you get that in, they're recovered, and they're ready to rock and roll the next day. Now, dietary supplements, there's tons of them out there. You know, what I would look at, again, we talk about protein. That's an easy way to get it. If you got an athlete who's on the go, or, you know, they're not used to eating a lot of protein, that's an easy way to get it in. Get some whey protein. If they're a vegan or vegetarian, then I would go pea protein. Would be a fine option. Whey's are the most high quality when you look at essential amino acids. Carbohydrate supplements, find what works, right? Find what your athlete likes, whether it's waxy maize, Vitargo, trying to think some others, you know, certain gels, shots, blocks, you know, however they want to do it. Find those supplements that work during training and what works. Same with electrolytes. You have that ratio, find that supplement, play with it. Then as for kind of like recovery and other things to consider, omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. I would have an athlete, you know, if they're really working hard, anybody really in general, hey, 2 to 3 grams of omega-3 fatty acids can help. And then caffeine, hey, you know, we're all prior military. We know that, hey, caffeine it works, right? You know, anybody downrange, remember the nice rippets you had over there. So caffeine is an effective ergogenic aid. So you can use that, you know, to kind of support high performance. Again, different sensitivity. You're going to have to play with that dose, but, you know, 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight is kind of the ratio there. If you want to be clinical about your dose of caffeine, yes, you can get it through a drink. Yes, you can get it through coffee. Yes, it could be a caffeinated gel pack, right? All of that's yes. But what I found most effective is a caffeinated gum. Why I like that is I can control that dose and be clinical with it. And then I get transmucosal delivery, so it gets in your system within 15 minutes. I don't have to worry about the gut. I don't have to worry about what I consumed ahead of time in terms of getting that caffeine in my system. So if you're working with an athlete and they're trying to PR a bike race or a run or a ruck, or you're trying to, caffeinated gum is probably the easiest way to do that, and the most reliable. I've personally found working with folks. All right. So we talked about that 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, which can be a really big dose. So start out on that 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and experiment with that. If you have to do any marksmanship tasks, I don't know if anybody's doing any type of biathlon events out there. I would limit it to 200 milligrams, just because there's research out there that is shown. This was in a Bud students. That once they went above 200 milligrams, the shot group started to open up a little bit. So if you got to do a marksmanship task, go on the lower end of the caffeine. If you don't have to, you can go on the higher end, because even if your fine motor skills are a little shaky, it's really those gross motor skills that's propelling you. Beta alanine is an interesting one that might be worth considering if you had repeated sprints or kind of that kick at the end. It buffers those hydrogen ions that kind of that acidic environment you create in the muscle from working hard. And then also kind of recovery that could be kind of an intra workout, just because most people aren't going to drink a protein shake like while they're running or doing a workout. Branched chain amino acids are my personal favorite, is essential amino acids over branched chain amino acids. Really easy to digest. And then that's going to help you get, kind of repair that tissue, and, prevent some of that breakdown that can occur with those long endurance events. So again, something to play with. Some essential amino acids might be easier on your stomach and easier to get that in. Now, caution with supplements, right? I want to make sure they're certified for sport. I want to get a third-party certification. If you guys are going to, especially if you guys are going to coach athletes at a level, any kind of professional level. Harrison mentioned I work with Jim Miller. Let me tell you, if you don't know, the UFC, they do a lot of drug testing. They're testing blood, they're testing urine. And so the last thing you want to do, right, that ruin your credibility, is have an athlete take something and then test positive, right? So NSF certified for sport, what does that mean? That means what's on the label is in the label, and it doesn't contain any banned substances, which is what you want to put in your body, and it's what you want to put in your athlete's body. If you don't go that route, you're taking a risk, and I just don't think the risk is the reward. So be really cautious on that. A good rule of thumb is no good supplement is ever bought at a gas station. All right. If there's one supplement they take from there, you're never going to get good as supplement at a gas station. Go with a reputable brand that has that NSF certified safe for sport. Right. Some special considerations you might have with your athletes: dietary preferences, environmental factors, gastrointestinal issues, which we'll dig into a little deeper. Plant-based athletes is fine. What you're going to have to focus on, again, high quality proteins and iron is going to be critical, because heme iron, which you get from animal sources, highly absorbable, right? You're going to get that if you eat steak, if you eat meat, probably not going to have to worry about iron as much, right? If they're not eating any meat, they're just eating plant, the non-heme isn't as absorbable. So what you want to make sure you're doing, hey, if your athlete's getting their iron from spinach, right? Spinach is high in iron, but it's not, that's non-heme. That's where I want a vitamin C source with it. So whether it's a citrus fruit, whether it's some bell peppers, different ways to get that in there. But those are the things you want to look at, because remember, that iron is going to drive our oxygen carrying capacity, in our blood cells. Female athletes, if they're menstruating, it might be worth getting on iron supplementing, especially if they're menstruating and they're doing long running, because one of the things that happens is that foot strike you get foot strike hemolysis. So you get a breakdown of some of those red blood cells. So if they're losing blood from menses and their that foot strike hemolysis is going on, they can get lower iron stores. So if you supplement with it, it can get those higher and then better oxygen carrying capacity. So that's a good thing. If you have any of the other big one I've seen is like gluten-free. If you have an athlete with celiac or any gluten sensitivities, just making sure, they're getting enough fiber in, because, rice and some of the gluten-free options don't have as much fiber. So maybe consider a fiber supplement. And then B vitamins as well sometimes can be challenging. So look for it there. Some of the environmental factors mentioned, I saw somebody's in Arizona, right? Where it's like 120 degrees. And I like somebody said Operation Supplement Safety, very useful. Yep, that's good. Really be on top of the fluid, sodium needs. If you have an athlete that is, let's say I got an athlete that's in Alaska right now, and they, for some silly reason, want to come and run a race in Texas in August, right? Unless I can get them in a sauna or something, which I'd recommend, to acclimate, when they come down here, they're going to lose more sodium in their sweat, right? Unacclimated people do. So then again, knowing as the coach, I'm really going to have them, I'm going to go higher sodium with those electrolytes. I'm going to have them salting their foods. I'm going to have them do all those things, because, that's going to affect it, right? And then also knowing that fluid intake. If you're in the cold, you're doing some race in the winter, understand you get decreased thirst sensation in those cold climates. And I've seen this working with Marines out in, if anybody's been to Bridgeport, California, at the Marine Mountain Warfare Center, we looked at some urine samples. I could have shared some pictures, but it was almost gelatinous. And why is that? Is you're moving out in the cold, you're not really thinking you're thirsty, but that cold air, you're losing a lot of water breathing. It's dry. So just know, those athletes are probably gonna have to stay on top of them drinking. If you're going to altitude, now we add some altitude in it. That might be where we consider some iron, and then also understand you're burning more energy at that. So if you had some sort of high mountain race, we're going 10,000 feet, right? With an athlete, I'm supplementing iron and getting it tested. This is the key, blood test, to make sure they're topped off. So when they go up there, they can acclimate. If you have some time at altitude for them to kind of acclimate, then their body has those iron stores to make those new red blood cells. Something to think about. That might be a little, more detailed, but you can store that away if you need it for longer. Looking at gastrointestinal issues, this is why we practice all this stuff ahead of time. This is why you don't try anything the day of the race, because, cramps, when I see cramps, what is that usually? Fluid or sodium are usually the big things. If I can't knock it out with fluid and I can't knock it out with sodium, then I start looking to potassium, then I start looking to magnesium. But most people with cramps, it's a fluid sodium thing. Bloating, again, something that maybe they consume too close to running or whatever event they're doing. So you might have to play with that. Nausea, and this is something else that's varies from athlete to athlete that you should find out when you work with them. Ask them if they have a nervous stomach when they compete. right? So if they have a nervous stomach when they compete, then I'm going to back off and I'm going to give them that minimum amount of carbohydrates right before, you know, the event or et cetera. I'll say like Jim, he does not do well eating before he does his MMA training. So that way, you know, so now I'm just trying to sneak in a shake. I'm trying to get in the most easy to digest thing, where you might have an athlete who like crushes, you know, I wouldn't recommend this, but I've known them, they can crush a pizza and go for a run, right? So you're not as worried. So just knowing your athlete, knowing what's well tolerated. And again, the key on race day is I want to have already practiced this. I want to do some sort of mock trial so I know I already have my fueling strategy and it works. And then low fiber, low fat meals when we're talking about leading up to the run. So with all this, what do we talk about? Personalized nutrition. So again, work with that athlete. You know, what Harrison might be able to consume and go out and crush a run might not work for Nate, right? So finding out. So you got to work with him for that. Looking at those carbohydrates, proteins, getting that fat balance, fluid intake optimization. Again, it's not expensive. A bathroom scale or a little portable scale, if you can take that out and you can have your athletes weigh before and after, and if you really want to make it easy for them, you can already have the drinks mixed up ready for them to go, to be like, oh, you lost a pound, here's 16 to 20 ounces of, you know, your recovery shake right here to go, you know, drink that while you're recovering, while you're doing your stretch, what have you. Oh, you lost 2 pounds. We need to work on that. You know, your strategy. We need to have you drink more while you're running or more while you're training. So I can't emphasize enough how effective that scale is for optimizing hydration. And if you want to either, you know, maintain athletic performance or see the biggest decrements, it's going to be that fluid shift. If you can prevent them from getting dehydrated, they're going to be much better in terms of performance wise. Environmental factors, considering the temperature, the humidity, all those factors, right? Going in. Hey, if you do have an athlete, giving back to that example, coming from a northern climate to a southern climate, and you can get them in a sauna regularly, I know that's kind of outside the scope of nutrition, but I'll throw it out there. That will increase blood volume. There is research to show that that'll increase blood volume. So that'll help you, you know, kind of do better when you get to that hot environment. So anything you can do to kind of help with that. And then finding out, again, personalizing those tolerances for that individual. With that being said, I didn't even glance at the time. What questions do you have? Because I do want to have some interaction, and if there are any specific questions, now's the time to ask them.
Great, Nick. So what we do here is, and Johnny McLaughlin already set the tone. We ask them to put a question mark in the chat. And so
okay,
that way not everyone speaks all at once. So anyone who put a question in, Nick, you can call their name, ask them to unmute themselves, and they'll ask their question. And this is how we go through one by one. And just a heads up, you're sharing your screen with me. Yeah.
Let me see.
And I'm happy to moderate it, brother. I can do that for us. So what we'll say, Johnny, go ahead and mute yourself and ask Coach Barringer your question.
Yes. First off, please excuse the no video. Don't have access to that on this computer. But in the same vein as the whole don't try new supplements on the day of the event. Now, say there is an athlete or a soldier attending a selection or doing like a longer through hike, and they are using heavy supplementation or a very like specific diet. Would that be like in, say they go to the selection, they obviously they can't do that because now it's contraband. Would that be a similar effect of trying a new supplement day of the event?
So you're saying they're using supplements for the train up, and then when they go to the course, they don't have those same supplements.
Correct. Would it affect the body similarly?
Yeah. So depends. And I'll give you the example. I'm okay with like, hey, use the creatine, use the thing to help you get that training volume to that level. Like I want to optimize. Like I wouldn't recommend somebody starve themselves to train it for Ranger School, right? That would be silly. Yeah. But if there is let's say a timed ruck where they're like, hey, we're not giving you any carbs, we're not giving you any food, I might have some tests in my kind of train up to mimic that same scenario as much as possible.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Wonderful. Mark, you want to go ahead, ask your question?
All right,
Bryson?
Coach, this is one based on experience that I had. So I have a athlete that comes in 1.3% body fat, retested him again in the bod pod, getting 0.8% body fat. He's an ultra marathoner going 100 miles. And I want to know, what is his fuel system? Because he's got no fat to run off of.
So Mark, this is, I'll give a quick body composition class. You guys ready for this? What is the one and only way to directly measure body fat?
The hydrostatic. No.
That's body density model. It's cadaver. I'd have to cut the fat off of you and weigh it. So why I say that, Mark, everything is an estimate. And so even though bod pod's very good, there can be errors in it. And those numbers means there's an error. It could be for multiple reasons. Did that athlete have any hair exposed? Did the athlete drink a bunch of water ahead of time or fluid that's making them weigh more than they really are, and therefore affecting their density? So I would say both of those are machine errors, or sometimes you do get an interesting athlete, and I've talked to these companies before, and they're aware of this, like with the bioelectrical impedance, which is a true measure of body water, right? And it estimates from that. And there's certain people with where they carry fluid in their compartment that they'll show up like a 2 or 3%. Nobody's 2 or 3% body fat. Maybe a bodybuilder on stage when they're cut for that little bit of time, they're 5% but he definitely has body fat that he's drawing on. What I would recommend doing with him is, if you really want to know his body fat, you could try, circumference measures, like getting a measure. If you could get him in a DEXA, but I know that's expensive, and getting him there, that would give more of a true measure. But otherwise, don't worry about body fat. Just worry about him fueling and how he performs.
Roger, I was just curious because of the numbers. When he was in,
those are ridiculous.
Yeah, when he was in off season, he was at 3%. So
yeah,
I just thought he was an anomaly. And then he was asking me questions, and I'm like, dude, you're an anomaly. I don't understand it. Drive on.
He's a mutant, right? Yeah.
Well, and
Exactly.
can I comment on this too? And this goes back to what we were saying in the beginning before Nick got on about data and science. So when I was strength coach for the Washington Redskins, we had a bod pod. The bod pod for us was completely unreliable, right? And so I was like, get this thing out of here. It's a coat rack, and it's killing the psychology of my players, because they're looking at that data and they're like, am I going to die? And then this is the thing that happened with that data, with the bod pod specifically. It's air displacement. Trying to control air displacement is virtually impossible. And now working for an NFL team with the bod pod, we got a number of guys who are 6'6", 6'7", 380. Put a 6'8", 380 guy in a bod pod. That's like trying to put a marshmallow into, a keyhole, and it don't work, right? So that also, the heat of that massive person changes the air viscosity, which changes the readings. At the same time, if you have a very small person in there, the readings get all messed up. And depending on the environment of the room, like if the room is next to like equipment that radiates heat, that also changes it. And because there was all these variables that were going in here, and I'm trying to talk my guys off a ledge, like rather than focusing on performance, I was like, hey, let's do this. Let's get this pod out of here. And I was ascribing to more what Nick was talking about. And I was like, hey, let's look at performance. Scale is king, right? So like, that's the one thing. Body weight was super important. And because I need to get a quicker measure of body fat, something that I could do repeatably, we instituted the InBod 250 at the time, which was bioimpedance. But that measure was really quick, unlike the bod pod, which takes like several minutes. And what then we did is we looked at the bioimpedance numbers. I didn't care what the numbers were. I cared about the trend, if that makes sense, right? So if somebody had like an anomalous score, but they're always anomalous, I was looking for fluctuations rather than like what the actual number is. So Sorry to speak too long on that answer. I just had a lot of experience with the Mod Pod.
No, you nailed it. Yeah, I mean, if it's near an air conditioning vent, if it's near all those, and bioelectrical impedance, great, especially if you can control hydration status. Now that you guys know, like, hey, if you get an in-body, control that hydration status. But I'll tell you what I'm liking more and more, that and that the technology is getting so cheap, you can get pretty good stuff off your cell phone, is circumference measures, where I do a scan of the body and I've got all those circumferences. So now as that athlete's body changes, I kind of know where I want it to change, right? If the waist isn't getting bigger, to Harris's point, and the biceps and the chest, and that's my goal, then hey, I'm winning. I'm doing well. And so there's a guy, if you know, for my nerds out there, Dr. Grant Tinsley out of Texas Tech. He's the head kind of body composition guy, and he just published a paper. And you know, he was getting data off the phone with circumference measures that matched a lot of his clinical lab measures. So it's out there. It's coming.
Awesome. Any other questions? Any other questions? Go ahead, put a question mark in the chat. And if not, we're going to go on. Wonderful. Wonderful. And just so you know, Nick really helped me out with my Ironman too. Like, we were talking all about fluid because my sweat rate was nuts. And yeah, I don't know, Nick, did I ever tell you how that went? Like, I lost my dang salt pills in the first couple miles of my marathon at the end after the bike ride, and I needed them so bad. And that was a struggle, brother.
Yeah. I mean, that's especially if you're a heavy sweater. Sodium is king, really on that. But no, hey, this has been my pleasure, Harrison. Again, sorry, you know, I had that little hiccup there, guys. But my contact's in there. Nate knows how to get a hold of me. Harrison knows how to get a hold of me. Anything I can do, you know, for you guys, anything nutritionally, any questions you have, please don't hesitate to reach out, because it's truly, I believe so much in this mission and what Harrison's doing, and I'm so thankful for it. So anything I can do to help out,
Thank you,
let me know.
Nick. Awesome. Just can you put your email in the chat real quick? I know you did just
Yep.
one last time, so it's at the bottom so everyone can do it. And while you're doing that, hey Nelson, I did see you threw a last minute question mark. Nick, you got time for one more question?
Of course, I always have time for one more question.
Nelson, go ahead.
Hey, Nick. So I know you mentioned that you were training Jim for his MMA fights and stuff, right? And that's where I'm having a little bit, not difficulty, but just trying to manage, because even though like combat sports, you know, there's short periods of time, but when in competition, they're, you know, in jiu-jitsu, they're fighting depending on what their bracket is. And they could take them all day. And a couple of my guys, you know, like got them close to silver, you know, a few gold medals in here, but you know, it's always on worlds. It's when that we start heading downwards. And I noticed that's a lot, either cramping or the nutrition.
So are they cutting weight for this? You're talking about jiu-jitsu in particular, BJJ?
Yeah. Particularly in jiu-jitsu. You know, now I have one guy that I've been working for at least a couple of years now. I started with him as, you know, as a kid, 19 years old. And his nutrition, and finally I haven't dialed up. Is easier to coach him. But then my you know, female, especially the females, you know, they try to cut so much to get into like a lower bracket and then come back up. And it's, you know, like it combined with the strength training, because that's where I focus the most, is the strength training and conditioning for competitions. It becomes a little frustrating because constantly they're going up and then they go down and then they immediately go up again. So
yeah, no, Nelson, I mean, you know, that's a conversation you got to have honestly with that athlete. Like my rule of thumb for MMA, I'll give it to you guys. 8% body weight. I want an athlete within 8% body weight if they have to cut weight, and that's with 24 hours to rehydrate or more, right? So take 8%, because there's some studies in Australia that showed when you go 10% or more, you're going to see impact. With, you know, jiu-jitsu players, judo players, a lot of times they weigh in the day of. So I don't want them to cut at all, because that's going to affect performance. And again, you know, female athletes in particular, depending on, you know, what time of the month, things like that, it can be harder. So I don't want, you know, either you're gonna have to time it out or figure out ways, or I don't know if they're on birth control, you know, there's other factors that you got to look at that can make that cut a lot harder. And I would try to convince them you know, one, if they're not professional, why are we cutting weight? You know, like, like Jim cuts weight because that's how he makes his living. Right. But if he was a recreational athlete, I wouldn't have cut weight, you know. I would say, hey, just train and try to be, you know, as lean as possible. You don't have excess weight to be in a bigger bracket. But I would have them try and be like, hey, let's not cut any weight this time. Let's enter, you know, let's have a practice tournament. Let's enter this tournament. If you know, you normally, you know, cut down to 135, compete at 140, compete at 145 and see how you feel. Because I think they would be surprised. And, you know, a lot of athletes, they perform better. They're like, hey, I'm out there on the mat. I have more energy when I'm grappling. So it's just kind of having that conversation and selling them on competing at a higher weight class.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that.
No problem.